Think about people like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, or Elon Musk. Their starting point wasn't millions of dollars sitting in the bank. Their starting point was a vision in their minds, an image they fully believed in, and then worked on every single day until it became reality. Neville Goddard, a renowned 20th century philosopher and lecturer, devoted his life to teaching about the power of imagination. In his book, Awaken Imagination, he emphasized that every change in your life, whether it's success, happiness, or prosperity, begins with your ability to imagine and believe in what you cannot yet see. When applied to financial freedom, this teaching holds a special power. You don't need to wait until you already have a lot of money to begin your journey toward wealth. What you need is to awaken your imagination. Clearly picture the person you want to become and let that belief guide your daily actions. And once you learn how to master your imagination, you'll realize this truth. Wealth doesn't start in your wallet. It starts in your mind. If you'd like to keep exploring this mindset and unlock your own path to financial freedom, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow the channel so you won't miss out on more empowering lessons like this one. Part 1. Human beings are products of imagination. Neville Goddard begins with a foundational statement. People are not merely products of their circumstances. First and foremost, they are products of the images they carry in their minds. He doesn't say that the material world is meaningless. Rather, he insists that every visible change begins with an inner vision, an idea nurtured until it becomes belief, which then drives action and ultimately manifests as external reality. Neville describes this process in simple terms. You imagine, then you feel it, the subconscious accepts it, you act on it, and the material world reflects it back to you. The key isn't just to daydream for fun, but to imagine with genuine emotion, to live in the feeling that it is already real. When images and emotions are repeated often enough, the subconscious treats them as truth and begins guiding your thoughts, choices, and daily habits in that direction. From a psychological standpoint, this explains the phenomenon of the self-fulfilling prophecy, or the mechanism of selective attention. If you believe opportunities are scarce, you'll overlook them. If you believe they exist, you'll notice and seize them. Neville's point is clear. To change the outer world, you must first rewrite the script in your mind. Once the script changes, your behavior changes. When behavior changes, results follow. Applied to financial freedom, the implications are obvious. Someone who constantly repeats, "Money is always short, I don't know how to invest," will act out of fear, holding on to cash, avoiding risk, and ignoring opportunities, and naturally their financial life mirrors that belief. On the other hand, someone who imagines themselves as a capable money manager, someone with the habit of investing consistently, will form habits to match, opening an investment account, automating monthly transfers, learning about index funds, and taking calculated risks. The mental picture guides the behavior, and over time, the behavior creates visible wealth. Consider some everyday illustrations. One person lives paycheck to paycheck and constantly complains, "I can't afford to invest." They dismiss every investment ad as irrelevant. Another person, with the same income, spends 15 minutes each night visualizing financial goals, writing down their emergency fund target, imagining the relief of having surplus money to invest, and then the next morning automatically transfers $50 into an investment account. After a few years, the difference is not just the account balance, but the mindset. The second person lives according to a completely different map, which opens up choices that were invisible before. Successful entrepreneurs often embody this principle. Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, and countless other founders began with an unrealized picture, a product, an experience, a market, before money or teams appeared. They nurtured that vision strongly enough to take risks, attract resources, and persist in action. As Neville would say, it was imagination that wrote the script for their chain of actions. It's also worth noting the role of motivation and emotion. Imagination isn't an empty exercise if it's charged with feeling. When you imagine financial freedom with emotions like peace, gratitude, and responsibility, you reduce fear-driven reactions and increase resilience to temporary setbacks, a vital trait for continuing to invest when markets fluctuate. By contrast, imagination colored by fear only reinforces a negative spiral. In summary, Neville's argument in this section is a strategic call. Before you change the numbers in your account, design a clear inner map. Write down a vivid image of the financial life you want, not vague daydreams, but a picture infused with feeling, your target numbers, how it feels to open your banking app each morning, how you spend your time when money is no longer a constant worry. As you repeat this image daily, your subconscious begins to adjust small choices, saving instead of spending, learning instead of ignoring, investing instead of hesitating. And it is precisely these small choices, accumulated over time, that crystallize into financial freedom. Part 2. The Power of Visualization. Neville Goddard emphasizes that imagination is not some meaningless game of the mind. It is the most powerful creative force human beings possess. When you visualize, you're not merely thinking about something. You are living in the state that it is already real. This state plants a seed in the subconscious, and the subconscious then arranges circumstances, opportunities, and even people around you to mirror what you have imagined. He presents a simple principle. Visualization with emotion gives birth to belief. Belief shapes behavior. Behavior creates results. That cycle repeats over and over, gradually aligning the outer world with the inner image. To understand this more clearly, compare it with modern neuroscience. Studies show that the brain doesn't strongly distinguish between a real experience and an emotionally charged, imagined experience. When an athlete visualizes crossing the finish line, both muscles and nerves respond similarly to actual training. That's why champions always practice mental rehearsal before competing. Neville goes further. He claims your entire life is the stage on which the visualizations you sustain over time are played out. Applied to finances, the power of visualization becomes strikingly clear. If someone constantly sees themselves as buried in debt, that image imprints deeply in the subconscious and leads to choices that reinforce the debt cycle. Overspending, delaying savings, impulsive investing. But if someone vividly imagines themselves as disciplined, with an emergency fund and a steadily growing investment account, that inner picture begins to pull their behavior toward it. They find it easier to say no to wasteful spending, easier to stick with automatic monthly investments, and calmer when markets fluctuate. Take Sarah, a 29-year-old in California, who once felt trapped by $45,000 in student loans. Instead of just thinking, "I need to pay this off," she began practicing visualization the way Neville suggested. Every night, she imagined seeing a zero balance on her loan statement and felt the relief and freedom of opening her banking app with no debt. She nurtured that emotion consistently. The result? Sarah started making small but powerful choices, taking extra freelance contracts, cutting back on dining out, and automating extra loan payments each month. 4 years later, she was debt-free and had her first savings to invest. The image in her mind became the anchor that pulled her out of the debt spiral. The same applies to anyone dreaming of financial independence. If you visualize yourself already financially free, for example with an investment portfolio generating enough passive income to live on, and feel that sense of security and autonomy right now, your subconscious will gradually guide your behavior onto that path. You'll start learning about index funds, optimizing your income, and avoiding unnecessary risks. Instead of being emotionally swayed by the market, you act from a place of ownership because your mind has already identified you as financially independent. Neville's key message is this: the world you see is not the cause, it's the effect. Visualization is the cause. You don't wait until you have money to imagine yourself wealthy. You must first imagine it, live in the feeling of it, and only then will the path to making it real begin to unfold. Part 3. Beliefs and Assumptions. If in the previous section Neville highlighted the power of visualization, here he takes it a step further. Every belief you nurture, every assumption you hold within, sooner or later becomes your external reality. According to Neville, people don't live according to what they want, they live according to what they truly believe. You may want financial freedom,
But if deep down you still believe that money is hard to earn, rich people are greedy, I'm not good with money, then those assumptions silently govern your actions and outcomes. The subconscious doesn't distinguish between truth and illusion. It simply operates according to the beliefs planted within it. He calls this the law of assumption. Assume the state you desire is already real and live as though it were present now. When you do, your thoughts, emotions, and actions gradually align with that state, and reality must shift to match it. Consider how this plays out in finance. Someone who believes, I'm the kind of person who's always in debt, will unconsciously recreate that script. They might pay off a credit card only to charge it up again on a vacation. In contrast, someone who assumes, I am disciplined, I am a long-term investor, will naturally make aligned decisions, opening a retirement account, ignoring get-rich-quick schemes, patiently building wealth. It's the assumption, not the wish, that writes the script of their life. Take Michael, a 35-year-old who once thought, I'm just not cut out for investing because my parents always struggled with money. He began shifting his assumption. Every night he repeated to himself, I am a wise investor, my money works for me. He didn't stop at words, he backed it with small actions, reading investment books, putting $50 a week into an index fund. 5 years later, not only had his portfolio grown steadily, but more importantly, he had transformed his self-image from someone fearful of money to someone with a solid belief that he could control his finances. Interestingly, behavioral science echoes this idea. When you believe, I am a runner, you're more likely to keep running than if you only set a goal to run 5K. Identity shapes behavior. Neville was teaching this decades ago. Assume yourself to be the person you want to become, and life will reflect that image back to you. On the path to financial freedom, belief and assumption are the true starting points. If you cling to the old belief that money is scarce, that I can't be wealthy, then every plan is just an empty shell. But if you change your assumption and live in the state of financial freedom as though it already exists, then your actions, choices, and opportunities will begin to align with it. Neville affirms, you don't need to chase wealth. You only need to assume you already are in that state, and it is that assumption that opens the way.
Part 4. Change yourself to change the world. Neville Goddard offered a revolutionary perspective. The outer world is not the cause, but merely the effect. It is the mirror reflecting your inner world. If you look around and see only struggle, scarcity, or debt, that isn't an unchangeable objective reality. It is the reflection of the beliefs, assumptions, and mental images you've been carrying within for a long time. To change the world you live in, you don't run out trying to fix every detail. You turn inward and change yourself first. He explains that people often get it backwards. They think, I'll be happy once I have more money, or I'll feel secure once I pay off all my debt. But Neville reverses the process. Change your inner state first. Feel abundance, freedom, and peace of mind right now, and then the outer world must rearrange itself to match that state. Consider a financial example. Emma, a 29-year-old teacher, always thought, I can only get by, I'll never be wealthy. She lived with constant worry about money, and true enough, she spent her entire paycheck each month. After reading Neville, Emma began practicing inner change. She imagined herself in control of her money and felt the security of having even a small savings cushion. Instead of repeating, I'll never have money, she shifted her assumption to, I am a good money manager. Money flows to me consistently. From there, her behavior changed. She began automatically setting aside $100 a month, then investing a small portion into index funds. Within just 2 years, Emma had nearly $3,000 in savings, but more importantly, she broke free from the cycle of lack and stepped into a state of greater stability and peace. Neville stressed, you cannot change the world by forcing it. You can only change yourself, and then the world changes in response. Just like standing in front of a mirror, you can't reach out and adjust the reflection. You must change yourself first
and the mirror will reflect the new image back. In the context of financial freedom, this means that if you hold on to a mindset of scarcity, of being always behind, then even with more income, you'll still feel it's never enough. But if you cultivate an inner state of abundance, every decision you make, from saving to investing to seeking opportunities, will align with that state, and your external results will begin to change. In other words, wealth doesn't start with your bank account balance. It starts with how you define and experience wealth in your own mind. Part 5. Acting from the state of already achieved. Neville Goddard insists what you desire can only become reality when you live in the state of already having it. You don't wait until money shows up in your account to feel secure. You feel that security right now. You don't wait until success arrives to feel confident. You carry the confidence of a successful person in this very moment. It may sound paradoxical, but this is the key. Neville calls it living from the end, living from the finished state. You clearly imagine the outcome you want, then step into it as if it has already happened. When your mind and emotions merge with that image, your behavior begins to shift, and it's precisely those new actions that lead you into the reality you envisioned. Take a financial example. John, a 32-year-old IT professional in New Jersey, longed for freedom, not working 60 hours a week just to cover debts. He used to think, once I'm debt-free, then I'll start investing. But after applying Neville's teachings, John changed his approach. He imagined himself as already financially free, waking up without bill anxiety, feeling the calm of having a safety cushion in his savings account. From that state, he began making different choices. Instead of spending his year-end bonus, he contributed to his 401k. Instead of buying new gadgets, he prioritized paying down his credit cards. Within 3 years, his debt had shrunk dramatically, his investments grew steadily, and most importantly, John had been living with the mindset of financial freedom long before it showed up in numbers. Another illustration. Think about long-term investors. Successful ones act as though they are already wealthy investors, patient, disciplined, unshaken by market swings. That state of being leads them to results that mirror the image they hold inside. Meanwhile, those who act like losers, panicking, selling off, or chasing trends, usually end up with exactly the outcomes they expected of themselves. Neville's reminder is clear. There is no bridge to your dream except walking from the state of already achieved. When you believe and feel I already am, you naturally begin to live, choose, and act in alignment. And the outer world has no choice but to rearrange itself to reflect what you've affirmed within. On the journey to financial freedom, this means act as though you are already financially free, even if your current account balance doesn't reflect it yet. When you spend with discipline, invest consistently, and make decisions like someone who is secure and confident, sooner or later, reality will catch up to your inner state. In other words, live as if you are already wealthy in spirit, and material wealth will find its way to you.
Part 6. Awakening the imagination. The power already within you. Neville Goddard emphasizes a core truth. Every bit of power you need to change your life is already within you, in your imagination. No one can hand you financial freedom, happiness, or success unless you first awaken that power yourself. The reason most people fail is not because they lack opportunity, but because they've never believed their imagination has real, practical value. They see it as a daydream, not as a creative tool. Neville insists, when you awaken your imagination, you become the architect of your destiny. The outer world is nothing more than a mirror reflecting the inner world you've envisioned. In today's context, this is clearer than ever. Technology, AI, and economic shifts may wipe out millions of jobs, but at the same time, they also open countless new paths: online businesses, crypto investing, content creation, digital asset building. The real question isn't, does the world still have opportunities for me?
But do I have enough imagination to see them and enough faith to turn them into reality? Take Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx. She once worked as a fax machine saleswoman with just $5,000 in savings. But in her imagination, she constantly saw herself creating a product women truly needed. She pictured her customers wearing her product and feeling more confident because of it. By holding firmly to that vision, Sarah transformed what seemed like a small idea into a billion-dollar empire. Or consider something more recent: everyday people who invested in crypto. They didn't step in because they had a guarantee of winning, but because they believed in a vision of the future, a decentralized financial system. That imagination of what could be drove them to learn, to take risks, and to stay consistent. Many of them changed their lives simply because they believed in what others could not yet see. Neville wants us to understand, awakening imagination isn't about wishful dreaming. It's about acting with faith. When you truly believe you have the right to financial freedom, that you can create value and build wealth, you begin to act differently. Saving, investing, learning new skills, seeking new opportunities. And the outer world responds in kind. In the end, that power has always been within you. Not in the bank, not in your boss, not in the government. You hold the key. And as Neville Goddard said, imagination is God in action. When you awaken your imagination, you don't just open the door to creativity. You open the door to the prosperity and financial freedom you've always desired. If there's only one thing you remember from Neville Goddard, let it be this: you are the product of your imagination. The world isn't waiting for you to get lucky, and it isn't waiting for someone to hand you an opportunity. It simply reflects the beliefs, assumptions, and images you nurture in your mind. Financial freedom, prosperity, or any form of success, all of it begins with a single idea in your imagination. Just as Bill Gates once dreamed of a computer in every home, or Elon Musk once imagined humans living on Mars, you too can plant the seed of imagination for your own journey toward freedom and wealth. And don't forget, imagination isn't for idle daydreaming. It's the fire that fuels action, persistence, and living as though you've already achieved your vision. When you believe strongly enough and act long enough, the world will rearrange itself to mirror that belief. So starting today, make just one small shift in the way you think and the way you envision your future. Because that future, bright or dark, already lies within the power you hold.